Hospital port as pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV and welcome to this video. It's actually an update on the previous video I did. Now, if you look on the channel, if you watch regularly, you will know that I have done a video called Should We Welcome Our AI Overlords? Now, after I finished that video, something a little bit strange happened, and I thought I'd better make a little follow-up video all about it. And it may surprise you, actually, because it involves electronic voice phenomenon, or possibly electronic voice phenomenon. I don't know if you're familiar with this particular phenomenon. Electronic voice phenomenon it's actually something I have addressed before several times. I made some videos with Don Phillips, where I do recommend, because that's where I go into detail about this particular subject. It's basically where certain sounds can be found on various electronic recordings that could be interpreted as voices or other sounds that are artificial or are organized and appear to be intelligently created, which can't be explained through the normal means that these electronic recordings are created, i.e. through microphones and things like that. It was popularized by a guy called Konstantin Radive. He was a Latvian guy who, in the 60s, he made some recordings. He made it through the 50s and 60s. He wrote a book in the 60s about it, which is where you make a recording basically, and sometimes things will appear on there. Sometimes you appear on, it'll sound like a voice, which is very, very interesting. Now, this goes back really to the invention of recorded sound, which has a long history that really goes back to the 19th century, where people made recordings using wax cylinders. This then later turned into like vinyl discs and things. Eventually there was things such as tapes and CDs, and eventually digital recordings, which we use today. It appears that EVP actually occurs on all of those mediums. It doesn't matter what kind of medium it is. The technology involved doesn't really seem to make any difference. In the same way, it's a bit like orb photography. The kind of technology you use to create the medium, just as with the old photographs, you can get it on modern digital cameras and indeed on old film and daguerreotype and things like that. In the same way, EVPs have been detected in the same way through recordings in wax cylinders in the 19th century, right through to modern digital MP3 recorders, which makes them kind of universal. And it was used before Radive. There were people who were using EVP recording, who were doing EVP type experiments. Sometimes these didn't involve recordings; they involved purpose-built devices, sometimes called ghost boxes or spirit boxes. They also date back to the 19th century, and they were a lot of quite famous scientists were actually involved in these experiments, where you try to pick up signals from discarnate spirits, extraterrestrials, other dimensional entities, the spirits of departed people, and you did it using various kinds of technology, such as that were quite emergent at the time, such as radio receivers and things like that, and indeed the cathode ray tube. Now, it's very interesting, actually, that the guy who invented, I've got the guy who, there was a mixture of people. I know that John Logie Baird, a Scottish guy, is actually credited with the invention of the television set. Funnily enough, he was a member of the SPR, Society for Psychical Research, and his television, the development of the television set, which of course we're all very familiar with today. It's the primary popular entertainment medium in the world. This was developed alongside electronic spirit communication devices, and he worked with people like Oliver Lodge, which I think is very, very interesting indeed. And of course, it was it was really, I say it was Radive who popularized this sort of thing, but it goes back a long time before. There's been several other people who've worked on this sort of thing. There was something called the Spiritcom. Now you may have seen this on the Ghost Hunters TV show, because it came back on that. They decided to redesign this particular machine and bring it on and sort of like try and relaunch it for this particular TV series. And this is a guy called William O'Neill who designed this. He believed he actually received the message psychically through psychical communication, through mediumship, from someone called George Mueller, who was a NASA scientist who died 6 years ago. He died, I think he died in 1974, 6 years before this experiment began. And they did a big press conference at the Washington Press Club. This was like it was right a bit like I don't know if it was the same room that the citizen hearing took place, but it was sort of in the same building. And in 1982, they held this particular press conference, and O'Neill stated to the entire world how he could hold two-way conversations. This was not just EVP. EVP are very often not actually forms. They don't appear to be forms of communication in the sense they're not necessarily messages directed at a certain person. Sometimes they are. Sometimes you'll hear you might hear someone you know who's died uttering your name in an EVP, but usually it's sometimes just random sounds. But O'Neill said this is different. He used this Spiritcom device apparently to hold two-way conversations. Like he would say something, and this Spiritcom device, using this electronic voice, it was audio, would speak in not just a recording, in real time. And the actual record, the voice sounds very weird, because the voice is actually it's one of those electro-larynx things which sounds so. I mean, I don't know if they still use them. Actually, I think they may have something more sophisticated today. But in the old days, when people when people would have some people would have their larynx removed, usually because they had cancer, and therefore they wouldn't be able to speak except in a whisper, and so they had this thing called electro-larynx, which basically was a machine which created a lot of vibration. And if you held it against your throat, the vibration would then reverberate within your respiration cavity, and you could speak in the same way that a larynx did. So you get this resonant sound creation, which allows you to speak. The thing is, the voice sounds awful. It sounds like the Dalek voice. I don't know if you ever heard anyone using an electro-larynx, but personally, if I was in that situation, I would prefer to whisper. I really would. It sounds horrible. But no one was able to reproduce this particular experiment, and he offered the design for free. You can get it; it's on a website today if you want to build your own. But no one else was able to make it work, and some people said that's because O'Neill was a medium. That's the thing. Funnily enough, this was featured on what's her name? The sexy voice girl. What's her name? Oh, The Darkest Secret. Yeah, it was featured on the Darkest Secret YouTube channel with Leonora Clay. I do recommend that. It was all stirred up against when Ghost Hunter decided to try and rebuild it, and they tried to use it. And what I suspect is this: it might have been fake. You see, I mean, I'm not a skeptic, as you know, but I suspect the Spiritcom was a fraud. I don't know. I mean, maybe some of you have other ideas, but that was because there is fraud. You see, in EVP, there are people who create fake EVPs. Yeah. And there was also there's several designs. Now the Ghost Box, there's this thing called Frank's box. Frank Sumption, I think his name was, designed this. Now I know people who use Ghost Boxes, and they do get results. And I don't think this is fake. However, this has been people have accused this guy of fraud and creating something which doesn't really present any evidence. And this works a different way. It's actually just an AM radio receiver, just like one you just adapted from something you buy commercially, and to listen to channels. And it has a different kind of tuner. It has a tuner which automatically sweeps continuously through all the bands and captures split-second snippets of sound intermittently sometimes usually on a random pattern, sometimes on a regular pattern, and apparently it's supposed to produce some kind of meaningful response. Now, I know people have used this and they've had good results from it, so I'm not sure, but I'm not going to dismiss this, even though Ben Radford, the skeptic, dismissed this. He did one of his little 5-minute rants about it. Now, some people call EVP transcommunication, instrumental transcommunication. That's another word for it, because thing about ITC, instrumental transcommunication, is it doesn't just involve, it's called that because it doesn't just involve audio. It can involve other things such as video. Now, by that, I mean, I remember Rosemary Ellen Guiley talked a bit about this. I remember she died, sadly. I remember I met her before she died. Because sometimes, I don't know if you've seen the film White Noise. Now, not this recent one. I mean, the film White Noise came up recently because Jam Noise 72 was talking about it. I've not actually seen it yet. She recommends it. I've not actually seen it. But there was a film in 2005 called White Noise where a guy, he's a medium and he detects ghosts by analyzing the static on an out-of-tune television set. And this goes back, like I said, to the invention of the television set. In fact, as I explained earlier, the TV was invented kind of an offshoot of a spirit communication device, what we today call ITC. This was like in the early 20th century. It had a different name. But this can happen. In a sense, this was created. Sometimes you can invite spirits. In the case of many psychical researchers, they'll invite spirits to use a television set or radio or a tape recorder or a digital recorder, or even a telephone to say, could you please? They'll say something. Could you please leave us a message on this particular instrument? And they will do so, or they'll come through live on an instrument. That's what the Spiricom supposedly did. Now, the thing about it is, these things can happen spontaneously on a normal device. Now, I remember I've been looking for it everywhere online and I can't find it, but I remember reading about it quite a time ago. It was when I was reported in one of these women's magazines. I mean, sometimes if I'm desperate for entertainment, and there's a lot of these magazines lying around in A&E, in the A&E waiting room, for example, if I'm desperate for some kind of entertainment on a boring shift, I might flick through them. And occasionally you get like a really interesting story. And one of them was of a woman who, and there were photographs to support this, a woman who had recently, her son had died. He died, I think he was about 14 or 15 years old, died very young. And she, of course, was devastated by this, as anyone would be. And she decided his bedroom. His bedroom was basically, she left it exactly as he left it. And I know a lot of people who lose loved ones do this. Their bedroom, the place where they lived, becomes a kind of shrine or memorial, or sort of like a mausoleum to the person who has died. And she decided, and she never touched a single thing in his room. His room was left exactly as he left it, with all his belongings left untouched. And this included a television set. Then a couple of years later, she used to go in there and just clean up. And she went, of course, she didn't just let dust gather. And she went in there, and there was a face on the TV set. Now, it wasn't like a full face, like a normal TV picture. It was almost like a white outline, without many details, almost like a white outline of facial features. Very similar to the thing I saw. And if you remember, I saw this thing in 1996 in my bedroom. I told you about in another video. It was sort of like almost like made of smoke, I describe it as. But it was the face of her son who appeared on this TV set. The TV set was not only was it not switched on, it was not plugged in. He was the only one who watched it, so she just left it there. And this face remained. And the photographer of the magazine caught this images of this face on the TV screen. That's the example of ITC. Oh, in this case, the TV wasn't switched on, so I don't know if it counts as an electronic effect. It may be just something else. It's almost like the spirit had come back to communicate with his mother. EVP sometimes is that, like I explained. Sometimes it is literally an attempt of actual communication, and the voice will say something that's directed to the spirit. That's to say something directed to the living person by the spirit. Now, at other times it's just like almost random noise. I'm going to give you some examples in a little while. I will give you some examples in a little while. Now, there are all kinds of explanation for these. Everything from a type of psychokinesis, in other words, maybe the imprinting of thoughts of living humans onto the medium. So it could be the person doing the experiment, even through some mechanism we don't yet understand. They are psychokinetically imprinting messages onto the medium. Of course, another alternative, probably more likely, is it's some kind of communication with spirit beings. These could be the spirits of the deceased, the souls of those who passed on, beings from other dimensions or planets, extraterrestrials, who are using this device, using this technology as a mechanism for communication. And they use other methods as well, as we're familiar with. Throughout history, they've used other devices, much more simple devices such as mirrors or bowls of water or the entrails of an owl and things like that. They use other methods as well, but this is just the way they do it in our world. It's really interesting. But of course, the skeptics then, of course, I mentioned Ben Radford earlier on. The skeptics, of course, have their own explanations. They come through explanations for these things all the time. And there's all kinds of reasons why they think that EVP is not real. And some of them, of course, as they say, may be hoaxes. They may be pranksters, maybe just create them. Excuse me. Just to have a laugh or for some kind of profit. I mean, this is what the spirit people accused the creators of the Spiricom of doing, O'Neill and Mika, and people they were essentially doing this as a con to try and get like money. And in that case, they may be correct, but there's other reasons as well. Now, one of the most popular is essentially there's nothing here. It's actually a form of pareidolia. What we are hearing is just, I've talked before about pareidolia. Pareidolia is the tendency in your brain to interpret sensory data in an organized manner, even if it is random. So the perfect example is you look into the clouds, and you try this, and you will do it if you try it. Look into the clouds, and you'll probably see a recognizable shape at some point. Faces most often. I think we've evolved to pick out faces. Faces are most common. You might see them in the wood knots on a wooden plank or something like. You can see them anywhere. You can see a recognizable shape, and this is normal. This is natural. And if you do it, if you try it, you will do it. And they say this essentially is the same thing. It's audio pareidolia, or apophenia is another one. That is the findings of connections and meanings which are random, unconnected, or meaningless, which is what it's described as. Chris French, the evidence. I've talked about this. Michael Shermer, as for Michael Shermer, Michael, as we know, as I've explained before, Michael Shermer is kind of wavering, isn't he? It's a bit like he's doing a bit of a Sam Harris. He's kind of wavering. But there's so the idea is you're actually just listening to random noise, and you're picking out something. You're picking out some kind of message you think is a voice. It sounds so. What you're just hearing something which has no meaning, and you're imposing meaning on it from from your imagination. In the same way, as I said before, skeptics use the pareidolia argument to explain why people see the Virgin Mary in a slice of toast and things like that. Now, there's several problems with this argument. You can probably guess where I'm going to go now. In terms of apophenia, you can apply the same argument in a sense, and an adaptation of the argument you do to visual pareidolia, which is, where's the cutoff point? I mean, for example, if you remember the time I went to that haunted pub with Don Phillips, he was picking up what distinctly sounded like voices. Now, you could say, well, these are just, and indeed this applies to the incident I'm going to tell you about in a minute, because this is very relevant to the current time. You could argue, well, that's just random noise and you think you hear a voice, but it sounds just like a voice. So you've got to ask the question to the skeptic then, okay, well, where's the statistical ceiling? Or the ceiling in terms of resembling a real voice, above which you'll stop calling it that, because calling it audio pareidolia. Because if you don't declare where that ceiling is, if you don't declare where the cutoff point is, anything could be audio pareidolia. You could be listening to a tune on the radio, and you might think, that's a really good song, I really like that, I'm going to go out and get the record. You go out and get the record and find the record doesn't exist. Why? Because you were listening to random noise. Did you know that? Yeah, all your favorite bands was just random noise. All those multi-billion selling Beatles albums, it's just random noise, and you think you're listening to music. And the skeptic will go, no, don't be ridiculous. Of course that's music. I can hear John Lennon singing, and I can hear the guitars and the drums and things like that. Yeah, but how do you know that? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? It sounds like these things. Yeah, but what I heard sounded like a voice. Yes, but you heard it on an EVP recording. Okay, it's just random noise. Where's the cutoff point, Mr. Skeptic? Where is it? Do you see? You can use this. It's the same argument they use over and over again. Now, according to Chris French, like I said, I take the mickey out of Chris French. I actually quite like the guy. I've spoken to him a few times. I quite like him. He's one of these nice guy skeptics I can get on with, like Mick West and people like that. He invited me to speak at his conference, of course, which I did, and it went down very well. It's called Seriously Suspicious, and I did a very good talk for that group. Michael Sherman, as I said, he's kind of on the fence at the moment. He might be about to cross the aisle, but he said something very interesting as well, which was specifically when it comes to any audio recording with an adjustable gain. Now, most of these things are automatic. So, for example, if you have a microphone on your device, it could be even this phone. I actually did a little EVP experiment last night with my phone recorder. I didn't pick anything up, but I recorded for 3 minutes. That when it goes quiet, and you can actually hear it on this, when your voice goes away, suddenly all the background noise starts to sound louder, and that's because the microphone gain is automatically turns up to compensate for the quiet, so it picks out more. And when that happens, of course, any noise that appears is going to be it can sound like speech. It's rather like the wah pedal on a guitar, on an electric guitar. The wah pedal, you see, what it does is it acts like a form of vibrato or something on the string, but it actually makes a sound that sounds like the voice wah. A lot of artists actually use that wah function on the pedal, on the guitar, on an electric guitar. And indeed, people, Shermer and other people have demonstrated this. They've picked up random noise, and it does, and they pick up a lot of, like, suddenly you hear this like buzz of noise because the gain is turned up, and suddenly when anything therefore that happens, anything that therefore comes into sounds much louder. And I noticed that last night, because suddenly the ticking of the clock, because I've got a little clock by my bedside table, that suddenly boosted in volume. And according to them, sometimes you can have like a voice, what sounds like a voice can appear within that. And that's another possibility. But again, that doesn't actually explain. You see, that could explain some EVPs, but it doesn't explain all of them. It doesn't explain those that do sound very, don't just vaguely resemble voices, because some EVPs are sort of like very electronically distorted, like one of the ones I'm going to talk about, which I've experienced personally. But others are very distinct as what you're hearing, the way you're hearing me speak now. And when that happens, again, you've got to ask. This all loops back to the original argument from the skeptics. Okay, if what you're talking about is this effect with the adjustable gain, firstly, some EVP enthusiasts, some of the scientists and explorers and ghost hunters who actually use EVP have adjusted by switching off the auto gain on their mic. and they still get EVPs. But also, what about when you get something that sounds very much like a human voice? That takes us back to the apophenia argument. Is it just, if it's just random, then where does the random, how much can you say that, how like a real recognizable sound can random noise produce? That's a interesting thing. That's the thing. So now the reason I'm bringing this up, this subject, is because of something that happened soon after I uploaded my last video. This is my video called "Should We Welcome Our AI Overlords?" Now, I don't know how many of you actually saw the comment I posted underneath that particular video related directly to this. It happened on Monday morning. Something very, very odd happened. I mean, this is now Tuesday evening. So I don't know if you. Sorry, it's Wednesday evening. It's Wednesday evening. I'm forgetting the days now. On Monday morning, something very strange happened. I uploaded, as you know, I uploaded the video on Sunday evening, and on Monday morning is when I noticed this. Now, I have, a lot of people have a morning routine, and one of mine is I never eat breakfast. I haven't eaten breakfast since I was like a little kid, so I don't eat breakfast. It's probably a habit I picked up when I joined hospital portering, when I did 6 to 2s. I was getting up like about 4 a.m. sometimes. What happened is, whenever I wake up, I have a cup of tea. I have a cup of tea like the one I've got here, and I usually have about half an hour before I have to get ready to go for work. And as I'm drinking the tea, I always review a recent HPANWO TV video. It's like a morning habit of mine. I get up, make my cup of tea, and I start watching a previous HPANWO TV video, one of my own productions, just to review it, just to see what it sounds like. I can sometimes pick up mistakes in it that way, which I didn't notice when I was editing it before I uploaded it, things like that. So my computer was switched off, so I used my mobile phone. I just had my phone here. I just basically tap into the house Wi-Fi, and I watch it that way. Now, while I was doing this on Monday morning, something strange happened, and I stopped. What's going on? I was actually watching it on YouTube. It wasn't a recording. I was watching it on YouTube via Wi-Fi, and suddenly I heard something that alerted me. So I stopped it, rewound it, and listened to it again. And what alerted me was still there. I tried it a third time to be certain it was still there. Now, I wasn't sure what to do about that, because this is weird. Because I don't remember hearing anything strange at the time when I was doing the video, but there it is. It's on there. I mean, there's not really an awful lot I could do, because I had to leave for work. I had a few minutes left, and I had to go for work, and I don't actually log into my primary Google account on my phone, just for security purposes. I only log into my spare account, which is what I posted the comment, which is what I used to post the comment. But I thought I'd better alert you, the viewers, in any way I could about that. So if you go to the video now, should we welcome our AI overlords, you'll see a comment by me from my spare account. That's the Benny J account, which says this: 2 hours, 12 minutes, 40 seconds. What's that noise? Now, I didn't receive any replies underneath, no thumbs or anything, so I don't know how many of you actually saw that. And I'd really like to know if any of you detected the same noise that I did. And I'm glad I did it, actually, especially because of what happened next, because it's good to have a historical record that I had detected something. And it's the best I could do at the time. And so I'm curious to know if any of you heard it too. Please do get in touch if you heard it. What I did when I got home was I wrote an article for HPANWO Voice about this. Now, what did I hear? What am I looking for? Well, the anomalous sound, which was just a few seconds after 2:12:40, is simply a single word that sounds to me like a male human voice uttering a single human word, and the word is "what." Now, I say "what" without a question mark, because, of course, punctuation implies meaning. There was also no intonation. There was just one word, "what." There was no intonation in the voice at all. which is unusual because, like with questions, I don't know if it's the same in every language, but certainly in English speakers, we tend to raise our voice instinctively, to raise the pitch of our voice at the end of a word or phrase which is meant to be a question. So, for example, I could say, "What did you say?" Or, "Excuse me, when's the train coming?" I think something like that. Or something like, "Could you let me know when you're coming home, please?" Things like that. It's something like that. If you're making a question or a request for information, you tend to raise our voice pitch at the end of a word. And I didn't do that because I didn't detect that with the word "what." It just said the word "what." So I thought, blimey. So after I listened to this at least 3 times, I mean, I must have listened to it probably maybe a couple more times to get the timestamp as right as I could. I mean, the timestamp 2:12:40 is actually a few seconds before. It actually appears sort of around 2:12:45 or 46. But because people probably click on that link, it was best to have it just a couple of seconds beforehand to make it easier to detect. So I went off to work and I thought, well, I'll deal with this issue some more when I get home. So I was thinking about it all day. I got home in the afternoon, fired up the PC, and then I was just really surprised and a little disappointed to find out that the anomaly had gone. At some point during the day, it just vanished from the video soundtrack as if it had never been there. I thought, what? I listened to it again. No, it's not there. I'd looked at the BitChute version, and that wasn't there either. The downloaded version wasn't on that either. So I can't. To come think of it, I haven't actually checked the actual edited version. I'll check the edited version and the raw file as well, but I haven't done that yet. But it's just gone. So I don't know did any of you hear it? If to hear it, you'd have had to watch the video to the end, more or less to that point, 2:12:40, sometime on Sunday evening or Monday morning. Because if you didn't hear it, I can't prove that I didn't imagine it, or maybe it was some transient artifact of my phone's reception. Now, I think it's unlikely because I don't think I imagine it. I don't think it is a transient artifact either because I replayed the recording 3 times. It was present throughout. But I can't prove it. I cannot prove it. So if you were watching that video soon after I upload it and you heard anything out the ordinary, please get in touch. Put a comment underneath or something. Funnily enough, though, this is not the first time something like this has happened to me. Something happened before like this. It happened on Third Rail Radio. I don't know how many of you actually listen to one of my radio shows I do called Third Rail Radio. Well, basically, every week I do a show with Trevor Murray, who's a Canadian chap. And we do like a little radio show, which is similar to the Mindset podcast, but it's just me and Trevor and sometimes Joe done. And funnily enough, in program 126, there was what I think is something very, very similar happen. And indeed, this one didn't disappear. This one was recorded and stayed recorded. I heard it at the time as well. And on program 127 of Third Rail Radio, Trevor and I discuss it. And what I've done is I've cut the clip out of that particular show and I've added it to an illustration. I'm now going to play you that clip, which is about the original situation where I possibly picked up an EVP. So have a listen to this. Right, Trevor, seeing as it's Halloween, I thought we should. On Halloween, I always like to produce some Halloweeny content, and indeed, my last HPANWO show was very Halloween-like. However, that was actually last night, Thursday night, from when we're recording. But this Halloween's different because we on Third Rail Radio have created something. We have discovered something which may be truly extraordinary and very spooky. Now, on last week's show, Trevor, and you and I have discussed this. On last week's show, something a bit odd happened. Just after Trevor and I sat down, we did our recording, like we always do. And then when we'd finished, now I remember hearing something a bit strange. Now, you didn't hear anything, I don't think, but I remember hearing it very distinctly. A strange noise suddenly appeared while we were recording. And I made a little mental note on my notepad here just to go back and check it. And when I did, I heard something a bit strange. Now we were recording the show on Skype, and we were using two recorders. We were using Skype's house recording app, but at the same time, I was running a backup recorder like I am now, which is actually a cheap freebie. It produces a standard definition stereo track, and you know, sometimes weird noises occur, like you get echoes and things like that, and that's mostly caused by feedback. If you, like, for example, you've got your speakers on or something, or sometimes when we sort of hand over the dialogue or we interrupt each other, our tracks are distorted because both our tracks get distorted because the gain is high on both microphones. But you know, this is different. I've listened to this program again. This is, and there's only one place where this weird thing happens. Now there's an anomaly, and you and I, we've discussed this. The anomaly is a burbling electronic sound. I'm just going to play it for you now.
What happened in the situation events?
This is it. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, did you hear that, Trevor?
Well, I did once you pointed that out last week, and we went over it. We had called each other back that night when we done the show, and excuse me. Now I can say there was nobody around me. I'm in my the bunker as I produce my shows. It's a nice little bunker I have here in my home. There's nobody around. And to me, I don't know, just from what I kept listening to it, it sounded like a man's voice for just like a split second.
It did. I'm just going to play it again for the listeners.
What happened in the situation events?
This is it. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, now, I don't know how many listeners heard that, but yeah, Trevor and I, when I first saw this, I contacted Trevor immediately and I said, Trevor, something a bit odd happened on the last show. And he said, what was it? Is everything okay? And I says, yeah, there's no technical problems, but we have this strange voice. Now, the strange anomalous sound. Now, for people who want to check this out, it's Third Rail Radio program 126, and it occurs at 1 hour, 28 minutes and 7 seconds into the program. That's when you can hear it. So check that. That's on the Spreaker one. Now, if you're listening to Trevor's own program on his channel, it's a little bit earlier because we took out the music halfway through. Now, to me, this sounds like a distorted voice.
It did sound like a man's voice, and I was like, because you had said, "Hey, there was nobody in the house with me. I'm alone when I'm doing this." Or if I'm here, we have 3 stories. Like I said, I'm in the basement, my bunker, and then there's 2 more stories above me in our house.
Yep.
And
I checked. I did ask you. I mean, I tried to find as Steve Mera calls it wrongly, a rational explanation.
I don't know. I'm like, I wasn't fooling. Like I wasn't fooling around. I'm not doing anything. Like I have a mixer board here, and I can change the voices if I want, but I guarantee I don't do that during our shows. But this was really strange. It just sounded like if you've ever had like I don't know if they had this in the UK, but like here in Canada, if you lived on a farm, they had like the party lines, and it's like you phone somebody, but then you can hear like the operator. It's an old system where someone could. See, I was like a kid when this was around, so I might be slicing it up a bit here, but it was like they call it a party line, so you could hear someone talking and you could interrupt the person as well.
Yes, a cross line we call
like
it.
Like you cross your lines, and like the old landline technology of phones. So that's what it sounded like. Just for a second there, someone had cut into our show. And it was like a man's voice, and I'm like, "What?" Like you play the film, like, well, I can guarantee there's nobody here. I'm underground now. Like
I'm in my room. I've got the door shut. I never have people around me when I'm recording. I'm the only one who ever comes in this room, actually.
The only time I've ever heard someone in your background is there was I believe a guy you said had a piano or something.
Oh, he actually lives in the flat above me. He's I was like, piano. That's Alan. Yeah, he lives above me.
But it was on my end. You knew how, like, it was coming through my end.
All right, this is important. Like, yes, because the backup recorder is the Skype house app is mono. It records in mono, but the backup recorder records in standard definition stereo, which means when I listen to it, I could hear distinctly because it's a stereo recording. Then you can hear one person's voice in one ear and Trevor's in the other. Now, I heard my voice in my left ear, Trevor's in my right. The anomaly is in my right ear, which means it's at Trevor's end.
Right. Right.
But it's not your. This is important. If it is a voice, and it does sound to me like a human voice, distorted by electronics, it doesn't resemble. It's not your voice or mine. It's not. This means it's not an echo. It's not a recording artifact, in my view. It just also it actually occurs at a time when you're not speaking, and it's certainly not an echo of what I was saying at the time.
Now, what's strange about that too is it happened right after. I won't say the full word.
Yeah,
SH.
that's right.
From the Alec Jones case, but I had fully said that, and you're like, because we had discussed you can't say certain words, or it's gonna really mess things up. And it was right after that I had said the full SH, and if you're familiar with what's going on with Alex Jones, that's when it happened. I was like that because I brought up. I said, "Well, what happened right around then?" And I go, "That's when." A few minutes before, like,
yes,
I don't know. It's really weird to me. Then I start thinking, we do talk about things that you won't hear on BBC or CBS or I can't even think the Canadian one here, the CBC. God, like we obviously they talk about what they're told to talk about. We're not told what to say, right? So now we do certain things. We had agreed. You'd said, please don't say the full word.
Yeah.
And because there's just certain things that just.
Well, you can't say if you say certain things. There's certain things you even mention words. In this case, it's a school where a lot of children were supposedly killed in a shooting.
Yeah.
If you say the name of the school, literally they will delete you. They'll delete you whatever you post unless it's a mainstream media production.
And I hate that we like just to let listeners know, like I think that's the first time in ever that like or at least since we've been doing Third Rail that we both agreed we shouldn't say that. But we pretty much the cerveza sickness that went around, everybody was getting you couldn't say the whole it was just, I think it's still tough to say what happened in the past 2 years with that, but anyways,
it's true. But the point was, you can't actually hear this on the show because, of course, I went back. I knew that one of us might let it slip at some point. But if we did that, then I'd simply stop the recording. I'd simply say, right, we're going to pause here. I'd go back during editing and I'd remove it, and that's what I did. So you can't actually hear Trevor say that. But literally 4 minutes later, we got this anomaly. Now, did you think we discussed this privately? We called each other again later on to talk about this.
Yeah.
And you said it's possible there's a connection there between that you uttering that word or that name.
Well,
and that anomaly.
Yeah, like I had brought that up. I said we were, we talk about things like I say you won't hear on the BBC or Fox or CNN and all that, but like I say, like certain things he really can't say, and we agreed before he did the show, let's not say it, and I buttered it up. Now it was edited out. You did all the editing, but I had said the full word, and obviously we can't. And but I think that's the first time, like 2.5 years, other than like cerveza sickness, nobody could talk about that, and everybody was kind of like you just agreed upon. I still call it the cerveza sickness, but yeah, like it comes in, and to me, I'm like, when you played it to me, I'm like, okay, it sounded like a man's voice.
Yeah.
And he said, like, it's like, I know it's hard to decipher, but to me, it sounded like it's a man's voice, but I don't know what he was saying. But I'm like, I don't know. Lines are get crossed. It has happened to us before. With Gareth on Mindset Central. We did a show, and then Gareth came back and said, guys, I got to play something for you. And it was, again, weird anomalies.
That was really alarming. Now I can't remember which Mindset podcast I think we discussed it in more than one Mindset podcast, because it was actually on the Paracast with Reeves that this actually happened.
Yeah.
And Trevor and Gareth and us, we did discuss it on the Mindset podcast in a couple of programs. I can't remember which Mindset podcast it was, unfortunately. So if anyone knows, because you let me know, that was another it was actually a similar sound, like it was a gruff, electronically distorted voice. It sounded like.
Now, in my mind, like I was always hard on Gareth about ghosts, because I'm like, it's one thing in the paranormal world, like I don't know. I have a hard time with ghosts and stuff, but to me, but then again, if I say, well, it's someone cutting in and listening to our call and they made a mistake, then people go, well, you're conspiracy minded. It's a hard battle. Like, there's definitely an anomaly in there. And to me, I'm like, it's either someone crossed lines with us, like that party line they used to have in landline, or it's something else. I am skeptical. I'm like the Michael Schumer when it comes to ghosts. You know, I just, I don't know. To me, I'm like, there's got to be something else. But that's fine. Like, I like discussing them and talking about it. But yeah, like something did come in on that part of the show that's very it's so strange to me, and I do think it's like wiretap. You know that the government listens to people, right? They wiretap.
They do, yes.
Like, so I mean, but as soon as you bring that up, people go, you're a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, no, but the government actually does this. So to me, I'm like, look, that's more probable to me that maybe our calls sometimes get listened to. Again, we speak the truth here. I can tell you, like, I think that's the first time ever that we discussed before the show not to say a certain place that Alex Jones got in trouble for. So
yeah, but I
don't even, you know, I think it's the first time, other than the cerveza sickness, is like kind of like you just know you can't say whatever. I still don't even like to say it because I think we get screwed on that. But yeah, something definitely clicked over, and it's a tough call, right? Because what was it? Yeah. What was it like? Like you know, someone might say it's a paranormal event, and then I lean more towards, well, I think that there is wiretapping, and maybe someone was listening to our show, and someone will say, "Oh, that's just conspiracy." So it's a tough road, isn't it? It's a tough road. Like, which, you know, wherever you come down on it, something happened, and I can guarantee you there was nobody in here. I'm underground, 10 feet underground. Like, I'm in a basement. There's nothing here. Like, I don't know, Ben. There's it's never happened before, but to me, when I listened to it, it really did sound like a man's voice. It was like two words, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. But then again, you know, I mean, the FBI wiretaps mafia guys all the time. Like, they do it, and I'm sure they must at sometimes screw up to the point where like in a Sicilian mafia or whatever, they've got people that listen and go, hey, listen, there's an anomaly here. I think we were being recorded, right?
Yeah,
I'm sure people like the NSA, the whatever the UK version, MI6 or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, these organizations, I'm thinking sometimes they do screw up. So I don't know. It's a very weird anomaly.
It could be like literally when you said the word, somebody in the national security and in the NSA or GCHQ, you know, they actually, or Vault 7 or whatever is at the CIA. It could be that there was literally like a light went off on someone's control panel and they pressed and they accidentally had their mic open or something like that. It could be something as simple as that. Now, you mentioned like the you know, anomaly, you know, artifacts, recording artifacts and sound anomalies can occur quite easily in certain circumstances. Now, we mentioned cross lines where you're on the phone, and this was actually in the pre-digital age, in the analog era, before digital phones came along. But it used to be suddenly, this actually did happen to my dad. My dad and mum have talked about this. It was quite common, called cross lines. You'd literally be on the phone to someone and suddenly you'd hear another voice cut in and they'd say, hello, hello. And there was someone else suddenly on the call. This was a mistake in the analog switchboard that they used to do in the old days. They sometimes made mistakes in the switchboard. And there was even the automated system with the rotary dials. Sometimes they would actually add someone to a call accidentally. And, you know, sometimes even it could be created sometimes as simple as like you had the phone lines, you know, you had the telegraph wires on their poles. Sometimes one would come loose, maybe the pole leaned over a little bit and it would just rub against another one. And sometimes the insulation would wear away and the two wires would touch each other. And you would actually literally get voice artifacts from the other line on your line.
Right.
So this can happen in the modern digital era. Also, you also get sometimes you get like sound recording artifacts and things like that. I mean, that is actually true. That actually does happen. Now, it's the thing is, there are certain circumstances where it doesn't. Now, there's certain circumstances where what's known as the electronic voice phenomenon, I think, is a serious issue of study, and sometimes it can be caused by what you would just say. It could be caused by some kind of interference on our Skype call, possibly because our call was being monitored. But I know you're a skeptic here, right? But it is also possible there is a paranormal explanation for this, and this is something I do take seriously. I don't know, but it's something I do take seriously, because to me, what I hear, I can't make out. It does sound like a voice, like I say, a burbling electronic sound. It resembles a distorted voice. It appears to utter two words, I think, but I can't make out what they were. But I can detect a series of vowels and consonants, maybe half a dozen vowels. I don't know what, but I can detect like very vague vowels and consonants. The voice is not yours or mine. It's somebody else. It's a third voice. That's very important to notice. I don't think it's an echo. It's on Trevor's end on the stereo track. You weren't talking at the time, and we're alone in the rooms. Now, we had a little discussion about this, and we decided we would bring it up in a future program. But until then, you and I decided we keep this matter private between us. And in fact, if you're listening to this show, right, this may well be the first time you've heard about this. And I am actually putting an article up on HPANWO Voice about it too, but I won't do that until after the show is actually posted. But we wanted to see if any of you third rail listeners also spotted it independently, because I thought some of you guys, George McKinley, come on, did you hear it? The others, you'd hear it and you'd contact us and say, Ben, Trevor, there's this weird voice on your show. We were really hoping one of you would do that, because that would be a really good independent confirmation. But so far, none of you did spot it. Or if you did spot it, you didn't contact us, which is okay. I mean, it was an experiment Trevor and I decided to do, but. But there you go. I mean, but electronic voice phenomenon, sometimes it's actually, it's a big subject, and we've discussed it before on this program. We've talked about it with Gareth many times because he's experienced it. But
he was, and I'm not against it. It's like from the paranormal world. I mean, I have interest in that. I think everybody does. I mean, Christ, look at the biggest podcaster out there, Joe Rogan. The guy keeps talking about UFOs or UAPs now. I mean, that's a paranormal thing. I've always been interested in the cryptozoology, Bigfoot. There's just things I find interested in, and once in a while I look into them and whatnot. But I've had some things happen that are kind of strange, and I always think there's got to be an explanation. Like a paranormal event like that's happened, and I'm like, that's really weird, like I don't know, like a ghost. I don't know if there's a better term to put it, but like a paranormal that's happened. I think that a lot of people do have these things, and I try to really explain it in a, I guess, scientific way. And like that anomaly that happened on the show, I thought, well, it wouldn't be a far stretch to think that we're being monitored by the government somehow.
Yeah,
they could be listening possible to us. I always think, because that's a real thing. FBI wiretaps.
Yeah, and you may say, like in the old days of wiretapping under J. Edgar Hoover, that obviously you'd have to be someone quite important and quite high up in that suspect list. And people say, well, Trevor and Ben, you just produce your own little amateur podcast. Why would they be interested in you? Well, I don't want to flatter myself. Trevor and I produce good quality content, but also wiretapping today is far easier. You don't even need people to do it. It can be done automatically with bots. It's very like the YouTube system that we know about, which we discussed earlier. So it is
well, even back in the 1950s, you talk about like J. Edgar Hoover, and even if you and I were talking on the phone and I mentioned the word communist or Marxist, I think that they would even click in on people like us. Well, I think they and if the government want 10,000 people for a program to do it, they'll pay the people to do it. Government's always good at getting the money. If they want to monitor people around the world, and they need 10,000 people, they will hire 10,000 people to work 50 hours a week. So I don't think that's a far stretch that we did have something like that, because I can tell you right now, there's nobody here. There's nobody. Like, I'm alone right now. It's noontime where I'm at, and I'm here alone. And like I said, I'm in a basement. There's like, I like the area I do it in, because I try to maximize the sound in the videos that we make, so they sound good. Yeah, I don't know what it was, Ben. I'm like, wow. You know, we are living on ancient First Nations burial ground. Maybe I thought of that too. I thought, because I am in Canada, I thought, well, the area that we're in was occupied by like Iroquois, Huron. There's a lot of tribes that lived here for thousands of years. For all I know, our house is built on an ancient Indian burial ground. I don't know.
It's possible. It could be like Keith Linder's house. Now, he lives. Keith Linder was the guy who lived in Washington State, USA. But he had a lot of hauntings. There's a lot of haunting and stuff in his house. I mean, there's a book been written about it. I can't remember, I've got a copy somewhere. But it was investigated by Steve Mera and Don Phillips, two paranormal researchers I know very well, who do a lot of ghost hunts. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to add to this, except, obviously now listeners are going to go and check it, and they're all going to hear it. None of them, if any of them heard it independently before, they didn't contact us, which is okay. But I think I'm more positive towards a paranormal explanation than yourself, Trevor. However, it is perfectly possible, what you were saying, because the idea that I'm also open to the idea that this is literally the NSA, some kind of artifact caused by the monitoring system, because that in the 1960s, IBM produced a computer for the CIA that specifically designed to monitor telephone traffic, that had a 4 megahertz CPU.
Right.
Now, it was highly classified computer, and in those days, publicly available computers were nowhere near that fast. In fact, the 4 megahertz CPU was only publicly available sometime in the 1990s. Right, so it was 30 years. This was technologies in the covert world of the CIA that was 30 years ahead of what was available publicly.
Well, like I say, the government
makes you wonder what they got now. Yeah, what have they got now?
Well, yeah, that's why I'm like, I'm sure people in the 1950s, just your average Joe and Sally, if they'd said, "Hey, I'm having a Marxist rally at my house this Saturday night," it might have been monitored and got busted. I'm sure. Like I say, the government says, "Hey, we need 10,000 people. Here's a blank check." They just go and do it. They need the computers. They need all that stuff. They can do it. And it's not far-fetched that we can be monitored every time, because again, we aren't talking about we aren't towing the line here. Like, we talk about what's in the world, but then we get, I think, a realistic perspective on a more honest perspective than you would get on the BBC or CBC and all that stuff, like all those channels. There are some bigger channels. Like, I do like the GB channel.
GB News, yes, it's excellent. But Trevor, honestly, if they had 1990s technology in the 60s, right, we must assume that here in the 2020s they have technology. The IBM may well have produced another computer for the CIA, which is 30 with technology 30 years ahead of what we have now. Now, it doesn't mean they're actually spying on us physically with people. What's probably happening is we're being monitored by a very, very sophisticated bot, which is far better than anything available in the public domain, far better than YouTube's algorithms, for example. And what would happen is, if we started, for example, discussing something criminal, we would never do this, right? Because you and I don't believe this is the way to go. Supposing we started discussing something to do with criminality, terrorism, espionage, things like that, and our conversation went on to possibly us taking seriously considering doing something like that for real.
Right.
Then probably a human operator would be alerted. But that's not. obviously, we're not going to do that, because we don't advocate. We don't advocate any kind of criminal violence or anything like that. So so that probably won't happen. Anyway, Trevor, it was interesting to to discuss that with you, and I'm glad we've now got this out in the open, and listeners can know about it, because we kept this secret, didn't we, between us?
Yeah, and it's a strange thing that happens. I say we got good equipment here. We're recording on. And something came up, and to me it did sound like a man's voice. It's like 2 words, but it's kind of muffled, so it's hard to. But I just do. I think anyone would say, yeah, it's a man's voice. Yep. And I don't know. It's what to say. It's
tricky, isn't it?
There's some stuff that happens in this world that, it's happened to me. I'm sure everyone. Some people don't like to talk about it too much, but we have on shows, and I will. But yeah, the things that have happened in my life, I just don't know how to explain that, and I try to do like a scientific method, but then it's like I don't know what that is. There's strange things that go on in this universe that I don't know how to explain them. So
I think all we can do, Trevor, is just wait and see if it comes back. If it does, then if I hear it, I'll we'll let you know. But I mean, listeners, if you hear anything like that on the show again, please do let us know, because it's possible that you might hear it and Trevor and I might miss it. So it's a little interesting little EVP experiment we've done. Very strange, isn't it? Now, what's going on there? What the hell was that? I mean, this is now 2 occasions, although I can't prove the most recent one, the second one. I can't prove that it actually happened. This is the problem, and some of you will not believe me. Some of you are going to say I made the whole thing up. I know some of you are that disingenuous that you'll just say, well, Ben's just lying, he made it up. Now, and of course I can't prove that I didn't. I didn't, though. I mean, some of you have more faith in me, and you do believe me that I am at least honest, and I don't do that sort of thing, and I don't. But I definitely had the voice said, what? And I replayed it again and again, at least 3 times, probably more. What? And it just, the voice was almost as loud as mine on the soundtrack. I didn't hear anything at the time. On Third Rail Radio, I did hear it, as you explained, but it's difficult to know what's actually going on here. I mean, what the actual explanation is. I mean, is this literally spirits using technology to communicate? Now, in the actual video in question, should we welcome our AI overlords, I did bring up the subject of Loeb, this demonic feminine figure that has been appearing in AI art. And I did ask the question, is this figure actually real and is using computers to manifest themselves visually in our world? Because that is a possibility. It's a possibility that Loeb is some kind of some kind of malevolent entity, or I assume malevolent based on how she looks, that is using modern technology in a sense to communicate, to frighten us, to do whatever Loeb does. So Loeb is essentially a more sophisticated version of EVP, or sorry, ITC to be precise. Now, I want to just show you something a little bit more. You might find this interesting. You can actually get it on the BBC's website. There we go. And it is called Out of the Ordinary, and it's Series 1, Episode 2. This was broadcast on Radio 4, and it's now a podcast, which is there's no rush for it. It's available. It says here available for over a year. Originally broadcast in 2013, quite a long time ago. There's the URL there. You can find it. And the series Out of the Ordinary is about 28 of these episodes. They're actually quite good. Some of them, of course, it's typical BBC, but it's still genuinely quite open-minded. Jolyon Jenkins, I suppose, is this chap here. It says it reports on the world of electronic voice phenomenon, EVP. The community of people who believe that the dead can speak to us through radio transmissions and white noise. The technique was introduced to the English-speaking world again by Radivay. Travelled to Britain in 1969 with recordings of Hitler, Churchill, and Stalin speaking from beyond the grave. The method is now mainstream of paranormal investigation. Jolyon unearths tapes from 40 years ago, made at a key seance held by Dr. Radivay in Gerrards Cross. Radivay eventually came to believe that a budgerigar called Putsy was passing on messages from a dead 14-year-old girl. Jolyon speaks to EVP current practitioners and to the man who believes that his recordings of animal noises also contain messages. The claims are improbable, are they? But they tell us interesting things about human perception and about our ability to construct a meaning from meaningless sound. Again and again, I dispute that. And about how our brains naturally fill the gaps where information is incomplete. Optical illusions are well known, but we are equally prone to being fooled by audio illusions. Sound artist Joe Banks suggests that while EVP researchers may be carrying out parapsychology experiments, they are unwittingly doing conventional psychological experiments. Right. This is just 29 minutes long. It's not a very long video. Recording podcast of this from BBC Radio 4. But I mean, I am, despite the fact that I enjoyed this program, I did have some criticisms of it, and I was quite harsh about it. Actually, what happened was because I listened to this, and so I decided to do. One of my disgusted Tunbridge Wells style letters, which I don't often do, but I did. Dear BBC, I must say this is the letter I sent to the BBC. I'll just go back to, you don't need to see that, so I'll just go back to normal screen share there. Here we go. I must say, I was rather dismayed by your Radio 4 program Out of the Ordinary. This 28-minute documentary, 29 minutes apparently, but anyway, was advertised as a report on the world of electronic voice phenomena, EVP, yet it failed to give the listener a complete and honest profile of the subject. It focused exclusively on the weakest cases and most notorious fakes. It does a bit, actually. I think it, and I expected that. It wasn't. You see, my thoughts have changed a little bit since I wrote this letter, but I'm still very annoyed. I still feel annoyed by it. I've gone a bit softer on it now than I was. By the way, if you want to read the entire letter, it's here. You can. I'll just show you it here. There you go. BBC on EVP, Wednesday, the 8th of October, 2014. There's the URL there, and so you can read the letter that I'm just reading out for you now. Okay. Yes, yet it failed to. It focused exclusively on the weakest of cases, most notorious fakes, and it addressed the criticisms of EVP research without exploring more recent and relevant counter-claims. The program brought up two conventional explanations for electronic voice phenomena. One, EVP sounds are just random noise that is interpreted by the human brain, as recognizable through a process called apophenia or audio pareidolia, the tendency of our senses to perceive organized patterns where there are none. Now, I actually, as I said, I've already addressed that. However, I mean, there is some reality to this, as I've explained. I should point out something I should have mentioned earlier, actually. There are times when I myself have experienced this kind of apophenia. And indeed, later on in the program, they've given an example of some scientists who play white noise to people or play random, repetitive sound or voice sounds, just random consonants and vowels from people speaking, repeated over and over again. And eventually, some of the participants in the experiment do detect or perceive. They do detect or perceive recognizable voices. However, in case of me, this is interesting because I remember being a child, and if I was driving along in a car with my dad driving, and I'd be sitting in the passenger seat, and everyone wouldn't be speaking, it'd be quiet, we'd be on a motorway or something, and the car engine would be giving off around, would be at a steady rate, unchanging sound and vibration coming from the engine and from the noise of the wind outside and things like that. And I found that I'd need to make a deliberate decision to do this, but I found myself hearing music coming through that sound. And very often I listened to what I heard coming through it, and it was really quite recognizable, was the song Daydream Believer by the Monkees. Daydream Believer, la, 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 and I could hear it quite clearly, embedded within that noise. So there is some truth behind that. The question though is where's the cutoff point? Anyway, number 2. EVP voices actually just come from radio signals that are added through interference to the recording when the microphone circuits inadvertently act as an aerial. Now, this is interesting. This is something that Sir Shermer brought up as well, that occasionally a tape recorder with just a microphone, sometimes those circuits can act under certain circumstances as an aerial, and they could pick up a radio signal from the electronic smog, which is out there, which of course is provides entertainment through radio and TV and things like that. Now, there's several problems with that. Firstly, even in the digital age now, where everything is encrypted and everything is a digital signal, so therefore you need a specific decoder and a particular kind of aerial to listen to it, you still get EVP effects. And anyway, I'll go on to that. Anyway, I'll go on to this anyway. And so also that people use Faraday cages, electro vacuums, and they still get EVP effects. Don Phillips has actually recorded EVP while scuba diving at 80 feet in depth, where you can't pick up any electro smog at all. Here we go. Just a brief amount of research into the subject of EVP will show you that many modern EVP researchers now control for the second explanation. Yeah, they do. They have placed their recorders inside a Faraday cage, a container that creates a radio vacuum inside it, and still obtain these mysterious voices, thereby ruling out explanation 2. There are even some who have recorded sounds deep underwater. Explanation 1 sounds reasonable on the one hand, but any EVP investigator experienced in addressing the detractors of their research will know that it contains a logical fallacy. It's a question that you might think is easy to answer. A voice is obviously a voice, and white noise is obviously white noise, isn't it? Yeah, see, I raised my tone, isn't it? That's what I talk about, you raising voice intonation. Yeah. Yes, it is. If you have proof that what you're hearing is a voice, in that there is a known person involved whom you're positive recorded it, but what if there isn't? What evidence do you have to go on if you come across what sounds distinctly like a voice but is totally anonymous? If you decide that it is indeed a person speaking, how do you make that judgment? If you think about it, the answer must be somehow to qualify the resemblance the sound has to the real human voice that it supposedly represents. To use a visual analogy, if you came across what looked like a painting of Mother Teresa on a wall, and it was totally anonymous, then you'd have to ask yourself how closely the painted image resembles the real Mother Teresa. To do that scientifically, you'd have to invent a practical mechanism with some kind of scale. Once that was designed, there would have to be once that was designed, I can't read my own writing here. Once that was designed, there would have to be a discussion about the quote-unquote level of closeness of what would become the universally agreed cutoff point between what was considered a random pattern and an artificial image. This so far has never been done, and therefore pareidolia, audio or otherwise, or apophenia, has become something of a trump card for skeptics, an unfalsifiable wrecking ball they can deploy at will. After all, if I wanted to be a truly obsessive curmudgeon, a great word that, isn't it? A truly obsessive curmudgeon, I could claim that the Sistine Chapel frescoes is the wrong word, it's murals I was looking for. The Sistine Chapel murals are just random patterns. Michelangelo just got in a temper one day and kicked some cans of paint around the room, what resulted is a completely haphazard splash of flying paint drops. And if you see any recognizable shapes there, like cherubs, naked angels, and hands of God, then I'm afraid it's just your brain interpreting those splashes as organized imagery when there is none in fact there. If you think what I said is ridiculous, then you need to enter into this discussion to define exactly where we draw the line between the random and the intentional. Otherwise, I'm entitled to use that argument as heedlessly as the skeptics do. One man, Mark J. Carlotto, has attempted to clear up the question by writing some computer software that measures artificiality, quote unquote. But this is not a task to be undertaken by any one individual. There has to be a consensus formed so that any future discoveries of this nature can be calculated precisely, and the studies can then skip over that tedious hurdle. Mark J. Colotto, incidentally, the reason he invented this computer program was because he was looking for artificial structures on Mars. And his program identified the face on Mars and its surrounding objects as 100 different from the random landscape of the Martian surface by 100 times, 100-fold. What applies to the visual sense applies to EVP too. It is very important when it comes to analyzing evidence collected for the electronic voice phenomenon. When is what sounds like a real voice, and when is it's just us mistaking white noise for a voice? You see, if I wanted to, I could claim that your radio show was just random noise that my brain interpreted as the program out of the ordinary. And I'm currently writing to the BBC to complain about a delusion. I was just interference, guys. I hope in future programs on the subject of EVP will explore further in terms of background research and talk to some of the dedicated paranormal investigators who are very well aware of the issues you raised in Out of the Ordinary, so much so that this program came across as very dated as well as misleading. I'm speaking specifically about people like Don Phillips, Steve Mera, Brian Allen, something like that. Definitely. So I thought that was remarkably interesting. And in terms of the issues the program raised and how it was wrong. Sometimes you can learn an awful lot from mistakes that TV programs or radio programs make, as well as what they get right. Now, on the subject of interesting TV programs, I've got another one I want to show you. And it's a TV program, not a radio program, so it's not really another as such. All right, guys, so now I'm going to give you another example of an EVP, a possible EVP that was picked up actually during another BBC program, believe it or not. So this is, again, I don't want to completely say the BBC is rubbish at presenting this particular subject, because they're not entirely. Now, this is the program I want to show you. This is one program I want to show you. So this one, let me just go to share screen. Now, it's this one here from BBC Three. I Believe in Ghosts with Joe Swash. Now, he's you may recognize him. He is an actor he does soap operas a lot, and I don't know what else he's done, but he was in EastEnders for a while. Not that I watched that piece of crap, but there you go. Joe Swash searches for proof that ghosts exist. On the journey, he meets Britain's youngest professional psychic and sleeps in a haunted bedroom to lure an amorous spirit. And it goes on a little bit more. But it is the bit we're going to focus on here. But it's a night alone in the Edinburgh vaults that makes Joe convinced he really believes in ghosts. Yeah, there we go. And there's the credits there. Problem is, it says here the program is not currently available on BBC iPlayer, even though it's very old. It was broadcast on the 5th of May 2010. So it's very old. It's like 13 plus years old, more or less, almost 13 years old. And well, it's not available. But you'll be glad to know, ladies and gentlemen, it's on YouTube, and there's various copies of this. Actually, there's it was uploaded 13 years ago, so it was uploaded soon after it was made. And indeed, it comes in, there's a segment there. It's in 6 parts there. And it's also this, you can see it here in its full-length version on this 3 months ago. This has only just been uploaded. So that looks good. I Believe in Ghosts with Joe Swash, Paranormal Investigation. History's Ours, our history documentaries. Right, so you can check it out if you want to check it out. As it happens, I downloaded it a while ago. And we're going to focus, I think, on the last part of the program, because it directly involves EVP. Now, what's happened is Joe, bless his socks, one of his challenges in making this program is that he goes to Edinburgh. Now, Edinburgh is reported to be one of the most haunted cities on Earth. There's more ghosts there, apparently, than almost anywhere else. And the most haunted part of Edinburgh is the vaults. And these are underground catacombs that can be found all over the city. And they have a very macabre reputation. Many people have seen ghosts and various ghouls and horrible things in those vaults. There's been a lot of death and destruction there. They were people used them for sheltering from. At one point, there was a massive fire in Edinburgh, and people sheltered in the vaults. But unfortunately, the stone walls of the vaults conducted the heat of the fire and basically turned the vaults into a kind of oven. It was pretty horrible, and so many people died in there from heat. It was very horrible thing. So Joe spends the night in there, and he hides. He's on a camp bed. I'm not going to show you him in the vaults. What happened with the interesting thing is afterwards, but he eventually comes out of the vaults. And that's where the interesting stuff begins. So let's just have a look, shall we? Let's have a look at this. By the way, I'm claiming fair use on everything I'm showing you in this particular program. So there. Let's get this out of the way. Hide. So this is it. This is him in the vaults.
This is not the worst thing I've ever done. I'm terrified.
He's completely alone in these underground catacombs, these like 800-year-old ancient stone chambers that lie beneath the city of Edinburgh. It's him on a camp bed with his camera.
I think I've heard footsteps outside.
I can hear noises. Go forward a little bit.
I feel like I've been down here. It's definitely the worst place I've been to. 100% without a shadow of a doubt. Every minute I stayed down here felt like every minute felt like it was 10 minutes. I feel like I've been down here 3 days. Out there in the hallway.
Would I do that? I mean, would I do what he just did? Probably not on my own. I think I'd be willing to do it with other people. In fact, I've done things like that. I mean, there was that time I spent the night in that pub with Don Phillips and a load of other people. And there's about like a dozen of us. Yeah, and so I would be willing to do that. I wouldn't, not on my own though. No way.
I heard women's footsteps. I don't know how I can explain that.
Well, I might do it for a bet on my own. I don't know. Joe was in the vault for 4 hours. My God.
It's daylight.
Oh, he must have gone down quite late at night then.
Even the professionals wouldn't even stay in there. Who the man? I'm the man.
Hey, it takes guts to do that. It does, yeah. Now, this is where it gets interesting because you'll see what happens.
I'm glad to be seeing the back of Edinburgh. Lovely city in that, but what's one scary place?
Yeah, I mean, Edinburgh, incidentally, its reputation for being haunted may come from the fact that there was like a witch panic there sometime in the 11th or 12th century. I think there was about 3/4 of the women in the city were burned at the stake or something like that for being witches or something crazy like that. But it was really incredible. They were literally setting up pyres everywhere to burn people. You know, in Scotland, it can get a bit like that. People in the past were very religious in Scotland.
Whether there was ghosts in there or whether it was just my brain on overtime, but there was something funny about that place last night.
See, if you're frightened, you will imagine things. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. We'll show you something interesting, some evidence that he picked up in a minute. But it is possible that his mind was playing tricks on him because he was so scared. That's quite possible.
I mean, as far as the investigation goes into finding ghosts, we haven't found any ghosts, and we haven't found any evidence that there are ghosts. But it doesn't mean to say.
Sorry for the spoiler, guys. It's still worth watching.
That I believe less in ghosts. I don't believe any more in them, but last night was spine chilling.
I must say, incidentally, no offense to Joe, but I mean, I don't think this is the best job ever done of casting, I think. This is the same series where you got Danny Dyer. Do you remember? I want to believe in UFOs. Wow, he goes to the set, he runs, he goes, I just saw a fucking UFO, mate. Yeah. This is it. This is where it gets interesting. A few days later.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
I'm Joe. Nice to meet you.
I'm Danny.
Nice to meet you, Danny.
Come and sit down.
Right, so I've been called to the studio where they've been editing my film. They found something strange on the tapes from the Edinburgh Vaults.
Ooh. Yeah, Danny, his name appears in the end credits of the film. He is the sound engineer for this particular program. I know, that would be my reaction too. Can you hear it?
Someone talking.
Did you hear that at the time?
I didn't hear that when I was in. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, a lot of times with EVPs you don't hear anything at the time. I didn't hear that word "what" when I was recording the last video I did about AI.
How long does that go on for?
It's about 15, 20 minutes.
No way, what, 15, 20 minutes that noise was coming through?
Yeah, all the way through.
And that's definitely someone talking.
Yeah, it sounds like it's one person.
It sounds like someone's reading something. It's like someone's reading a prayer or...
Someone suggested it sounded a bit like The Last Rites.
Oh God! I can't pick up any words there, but it's definitely there's a voice. You could hear the voice.
That's made everything on my back and my hair just all stand up.
Good thing.
Look, my nipples have all... What explanation could there be for that?
When we first found out there was a club above it,
Yeah.
we thought, oh, that's what it is, and it'll be the club. It could be someone in the club, cleaners. But it's not.
It's a nightclub, like where there's a lot of noise from music and stuff.
A cleaners conversation.
No.
And we've actually got some of the sound
From the club?
When the club was still.
Yeah, because it was on, weren't it, for a couple of hours.
Right. So that's the loud. Imagine how loud that music is in the club.
And I could hear that quite. You could feel that kind. You can hear it over the top of the music.
Exactly. So it's not physically possible for that voice that we heard to be coming from the club.
And if you think about it, if they're underground, so it's not electrosmog. It's not interference. If it even, I don't know if this was a digital recorder, even if it's possible, even if it was like an analog recorder, and the microphone was acting inadvertently as an aerial, which can happen occasionally. Underground, it wouldn't. You know, radio waves don't penetrate into the basement. Try using your mobile phone on the London Underground. You'll see what I mean. Also, I should point out that these people who say things like, oh, let me just come off the share screen for a moment. These people who say things like, oh, it was, it's just radio waves. You're picking up radio waves from a nearby station. However, those people can never identify what is being broadcast from the station at that moment, which is then reproduced on the EVP. You don't hear Terry Wogan's voice or someone going, "Oh, hello," and you don't hear that on EVP. It's something. It's always a broadcast that can't be identified, which is a little bit convenient, isn't it? Let's carry on.
Because that's what we all thought. First of all, like, it must be from the club, but it can't be.
And it can't be a conversation with someone else because there's no gap.
No.
There's no gap for a reply. It's just a rolled off a monologue.
Yeah.
Can you hear any? It's a man's voice, definitely a male. Can't hear any words.
It's not the microphone picking up, a radio signal. I mean, you're under the ground.
It sounds echoey, almost like it is a. It sounds echoey and distant, maybe slightly electronically distorted.
Yeah.
Because as well as it being on the camera that's locked off on you, you can hear it less so on your microphone. So it can't be a camera fault.
It's on two mics. Oh my God.
That's ridiculous. That's really, really freaky.
Yeah.
It stops abruptly.
kids.
To me, personally, I perceive it as a child.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It is quite high pitched.
And then, I mean, the talking, which has been going for sort of 15, 20 minutes, then just stops.
Every little noise I was hearing, like if there's a pin drop, I'd have heard a pin drop. So for you to say that there was that noise hanging around me and I didn't hear it, then for me, that kind of cements it in my mind that it's got to have been something supernatural.
Well, that is an explanation. I mean, it's a possible explanation, yeah. I mean, why we shouldn't discount that. The question is what?
If I'd heard that, I'd have been out there in a shot. It's one of those things you just can't explain, isn't it? You'll never be able to explain what it is.
Oh, God, yeah.
It was a right mind battle whether to stick your neck out on the line and say, yes, I believe in ghosts, or no.
Well, how about that? You know, that is... Now, what could that be? And now, it could be that it's staged. I accept that. I'm no doubt some skeptics will say the BBC they faked that just to make the program more dramatic. And of course, we know that TV companies will fake things for the purposes of sensation. We know that, you know, the fights that break out on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, they're directed. The people are directed to have these arguments and these fights. And of course, well, I'm not going to say anything about Most Haunted right now, but you know, it does happen. So I can't be sure that that's not what we're seeing there. However, I know that other investigators have been to various haunted locations and have received similar evidence, which is not faked. Don Phillips is a good example of that, whom I've worked with personally. So then what is the electronic voice phenomenon then? This is a question I don't know. I mean, it's clearly voices sound like human voices in many cases. Coming from where? Whose voices? Not people who are speaking into microphones. Somebody else coming from somewhere else. Who are they? How do they get on there? How does the voices get on there? Something it seems to appear to be using the medium in the same way we use it to record sound. We record our own voices. I'm recording myself right now, and it appears with ITC, somebody else is using it in the same way, whom we can't perceive. Somebody an intelligence outside our world. Sometimes there's evidence to suggest that these are people who departed. There are people who hear voices they recognize of people who departed. There was the lady who saw the outline of her son's face on the TV screen. That was there for a long time, long enough for the photographer from Women's Weekly to go around there and photograph it. This is a subject I have brought up before, and I will no doubt bring it up again. I'm only bringing it up now on this particular video. The impetus to make this video has only emerged because of what happened on Monday morning when I was listening back or watching back a video I made the previous evening. I don't know. You see, presumably in this case it was something on YouTube. The whatever said what. Used YouTube's system, the YouTube server, to put that word onto there, and then strangely enough, removed it. Because I've heard stories that EVPs can vanish. You heard one moment, then you listen back to the tape, and they're not there. Interesting question. I should have just I should have just recorded myself, just recording, made sure I had a proper recording of what I heard. But I didn't know it was going to vanish. The one which I did with Trevor on Third Rail Radio, that one never vanished. You can listen to it now. So what are they, ladies and gentlemen? What do you think they are? I don't know. Anyway, that's something we can bring up in the discussion, in the description, in the comments section, and I'll be doing another video soon. Haven't done a live stream for a while. I'm still waiting for Trump to get arrested, because if that happens, I'll do a live stream about that. Then something else might emerge, which might mean I'll want to do a live stream. Or who knows? I've got other videos planned. I'm going away, of course. There'll be a reportage coming in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, thank you all of you for watching HPANWO TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.